Hi, I'm Nafisa, and I was a PR executive in beauty and fashion, and this is Lepas Sekolah.
Where did you grow up and what parts of the environment do you think shaped you into who you are today?
I actually grew up across two countries mainly, so Malaysia and Hong Kong. So I spent a lot of my early adolescence in Hong Kong. And at that age, I don't think you absorb a lot of what's around you, consciously at least. Now, in hindsight, as an adult, I do realize that multiculturalism is at the root of everything I do. It's definitely driven a lot of my natural interests within sort of like society, political interests as well, and also my academic background. Understanding that like there's multifaceted cultures and backgrounds that quite literally surround us on our everyday, and being hyper aware of it as well is something that is like so powerful in the way that you carry yourself and the things that you do and the way you speak and the way you treat people. I would say being a third culture kid is something that definitely shaped who I am as a person. So yeah.
You mentioned growing up in Hong Kong and Malaysia, and at some point, obviously, you stayed in the
In
UK as
London,
well.
yes.
So, growing across three different countries, how did it shape your view on success?
How it impacted my view and success was that if you have the privilege to access different cultures like that, that was success on its own to me. The accessibility to be able to travel, to be able to experience different backgrounds, different people, and to be appreciative of that. I think you can have access to it, but not utilize it to the extent that it should be to be able to consider yourself as successful, right? As much as like there is like monetary success in that, obviously involves. I think what really is the winning factor is being able to hold and understand and practice a lot of the cultures that you come across in your everyday, in the villages that you create, in the communities that you take space in, and sharing that as well wherever you can. I think it goes beyond the accessibility, it's the practice of it as well.
Given that definition of success, what do you want to be when you were growing up?
What did I want to be? About 10 different things. So now I've narrowed it down to like two. It takes like 26 years. So because of the exposure that I had growing up, I was never sure of one thing. I was very indecisive because I knew that I had access to a lot of different fields, a lot of different things, and I also had interest in it. So, for example, I have very much my creative side, and then I have, the science side of things. At one point, I wanted to do medicine, and then I realized I cannot stand seeing blood and organs. I would never want to do that. So, I just didn't end up doing medicine for that reason. And then I looked into the avenue of, okay, I like science, I'm good at it. What can I do within that? And then that's how I kind of came about choosing my degree, which is biological sciences. Because I went into it wanting to eventually specialize in neuroscience. At the end of the day, by chance, I ended up specializing in ecology and climate change. And these are all factors that, I didn't have control in. But at one point before university and before my A levels, I actually was interested to go into film and cinematography. Like that's what I wanted to do. But I never had an avenue to do that. Well, I guess I could have had it, but I don't think it was offered or presented to me or as supported as it would be with science. Coming from a Asian background. So I don't think it's sad because I think at the end of the day, as you grow older and you live your life and you start paving out your own path, you're able to revisit that. I don't think it's ever a closed door. I think it's just shut ajar. Yeah, I did want to be multiple different things throughout my life. And now I'm just trying to figure out how to combine those two fields that I've always had a passion in. Yeah, baby steps with that.
Let's go to your secondary school days. So, considering that halfway through you obviously moved countries, so what education path did you take? Like, what was your secondary school like?
My secondary school was really stable in comparison to like my primary schooling because I grew up in Malaysia solely and I did the British system. I did that all the way from the start of year 7 to the end of my A levels and then onto university. I think that choice just came naturally. I think it was just the fact that I had found a school that was convenient in terms of like what was offered in terms of subjects, what I already knew. So for example, I wouldn't have been able to join a public school naturally once I moved back from Hong Kong because I didn't have the same syllabus. So I wasn't able to speak Malay as fluently. I mean, thank God I can now. But back then, like, I would have definitely struggled. So yeah, it was most so out of like convenience that I ended up staying within that system, and just realizing quite early on that I would end up in the UK for my higher education. Yeah.
And having this dilemma of not being sure exactly of what you want to do, how did you come about to making the decision of what choice of what subjects you were to take at A levels?
That was quite a hard decision to make, actually. I remember I was one of the last few people in my cohort to submit my choices on what I wanted to do for A levels, because I was so dead set on not doing my A levels and like going into film somehow, because the school I was at didn't offer that, and I wanted that avenue so bad. Obviously it's not very realistic considering the fact that you've gone up to your GCSEs and you haven't actually practiced that properly. So from my parents' point of view, it was very much like, right, let's see what you're already good at and let's work with that. And I kind of went along with it. I mean, at that age, you're very impressionable. You don't really trust your judgment fully either. So it's like when you are presenting options to people who kind of have the maneuver in their hands of like your life and your future, and it's sort of not backed by a lot of potential, you are going to just take their word for it and move on, you know? So that's essentially what I did. It wasn't really my choice, was it? So I wouldn't have it any other way, actually. I think it made me more of a well-rounded person now.
So what subjects did you end up taking?
I ended up studying chemistry, biology, mathematics, and I did a extended project qualification as well. So yeah, but for the extended project qualification, it was in English literature, so something that was completely different to what I was studying.
Do you think that those choices of subjects allow you to keep your options open as well as to what you would then do in university?
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, I think this is more of a complicated question. I think because of where I ended up studying, yes, because I was able to excel in those subjects and I knew I could, that the institution I ended up being in offered so many avenues for whatever creative fuel you wanted to feed. So I was very lucky in that sense. But I think sometimes not all institutions offer that, which is quite sad. I mean, that's where the whole conversation about the arts being underfunded come in and everything. Yeah, I think I got very lucky in the sense that I was able to explore those avenues throughout my higher education because of where I ended up, because the subjects that I studied, one, not only made me well-rounded, but because I was more secure in it, I was able to explore that creative side of me within my free time rather than like giving my all just to science, you know? So yeah.
So you ended up studying at Imperial College in London.
Yes.
Can you recall what was the application journey?
It was really rigorous. The application journey is very rigorous. I wouldn't say it's as rigorous as applying to Oxbridge, for example, but it's not far off. You spend a lot of extra hours and a lot of extra time perfecting your personal statement, which is what will carry you, in my opinion. On top of the grades, obviously, the grades have to be there without a doubt.
Yeah.
But fun fact, I actually missed one of my grades for my offer to Imperial, but they still offered it to me. Not sure why. To this day, I never asked, but I kind of wish I did sometimes, actually. So for Imperial College, I think the application process is something that you need to dedicate a lot of yourself to, and you really need to realign your intentions as well, because if you're able to solidify that, they can't shake you. Like nothing can shake you. No interview, no rejection can shake you, because you know what you want to do and you're certain of it. Like I said, at that age, you're quite impressionable and you're not entirely sure, like, if this is in your head, like this is your entire life, right? So it's like in that moment, it's quite daunting to be solidifying such big thoughts and big ambitions on a piece of paper to people you'll never see, probably, for a future that you don't even know about yet and you aren't even certain of yet. So I would say just trust your gut and do things wholeheartedly with really good intentions, and just work really hard in school. Like really just give it your all the time. Like if you weren't giving it your best, then I don't think there's a chance of you feeling successful no matter how far you get, you know? So yeah.
The question then comes, why Imperial and why biological sciences?
So Imperial mainly because, well, I mean, it's a great school. So, you
prestigious,
know, the Parents are happy,
Yeah.
everybody's happy, they're paying for the education. So so it was actually between Imperial and UCL, and I really, really was this close to picking UCL because they were a lot more humanities driven. So I knew there would be a lot more avenues for me to sort of feed that creative side that I had to myself. But I ended up picking Imperial because overall it was just a better university. It really was something that the parents wanted, and I didn't know any better. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they're both great schools. I'm fully aware of that. So I'm not really losing with whatever decision I make. And with biological sciences, I think it was because it was a subject that was not as specified. It was very generalized. So you were able to study different facets of biology, right? And because, like I said, I had the intention of specializing in neuroscience, I wasn't also fully sure of that yet, right? Because I had never fully studied neuroscience. So I was like, I don't even know if I have a full interest in it. I think as a subject and a topic overall, yeah, I could talk about it all day. I can read about it all day. I still do to this day. But whether you can academically invest yourself in it or as a profession, I wasn't sure. So I wanted an avenue that would still give me leeway to explore different sides of biology, because like I said, in school, like, it came quite naturally to me. So I enjoyed all facets of it. I enjoyed the cellular and microbiology section. There was also avenues that we didn't get to explore as much that were very interesting to me. So evolution, for example, right? You don't really touch on that. You don't go into depth before you reach universities. And I think the good thing about biological sciences at Imperial specifically is that they offer so many different facets of this science in such great depth, and the resources that you're given there, otherworldly. Like, there's a reason why it is why, one of the best institutions. It's because of the resources they give you. Considering that each module that you learn as well is within a certain time frame, it can feel very daunting and you can miss a lot of things, but somehow they don't do that. Like, they just know what they're doing. To answer the question plain and simple, biological sciences, not really out of my first choice, but it was more so because I was what I was good at, and I just went with it. And then with Imperial, great university, great institution, great resources that you will not be able to find anywhere else, really. So, yeah.
Three things: life in London, studying in Imperial, and pursuing biological sciences. What was the expectation going in, and what was the reality of it?
Oh, that's such a loaded question. Oh my God. Life in London, that's a big one. I'll save that for last, I think.
Yeah.
Studying in Imperial, there was so much pressure on this side of the
Yeah, of
world.
course.
Like, you can only imagine, especially coming from an Asian background, an Asian household, like, extended family members that I haven't spoken to in years are like, so we heard,
Yeah.
and it's like, and then they have all these questions and advice for you, and you're just sat there and you're like, why do I need to know all of this? Like, isn't this supposed to be a fun experience? And reaching Imperial, you are struck with an insane level of imposter syndrome. Like, it is everywhere and it hits you hard, and it hits everybody. Actually, it affects everyone there. The smartest people within our cohort, people who are on dean's lists, had crazy imposter syndrome. So you can only imagine people who were kind of like average or above average. For example, me, that was like, whoa, like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't know anything. And you feel very inferior. I think you suffer with a lot of inferiority complex in institutions like that, which makes no sense because, like, you're literally in a certain top percent of the world that
Exactly.
ends up there, But it's really all just like a mental game. Expectation and reality were very different when I arrived at uni, because you realize, yeah, this is quite a big privilege to be here, and like, not a lot of people get this opportunity. So when you do, you kind of start questioning, why me? Because you've kind of been doing everything a little bit more on autopilot in like a safe zone, right? Like, when you're back home around family, you've got people maneuvering, your decisions, for example, your parents, etc. So when you have to kind of stand on your own and stand your own ground and be able to carry yourself and make your own decisions, it's quite scary. It's very overwhelming, but you really do just have to face it with a lot of confidence and a lot of faking it as you go along. I think in terms of expectation and reality of living in London, I didn't really have much expectation. I was just kind of like, yay, independence, yay, freedom. And then you go there and it's like, you definitely hit huge peaks of loneliness and isolation, moving away from home, especially moving from the east to the west, where community is such a huge thing here. And in London, of all metropolitan cities, it is such an extremely isolating city. It's very individualistic. You very much just earphones in, walk, you don't look at anyone, you don't speak to anyone. There are definitely pockets of interactions of community here and there that lift your day and lift your mood, but that's how rare it is. Like that when it happens, it has such a profound effect on you. Whereas here back home in the East, it's left, right, center. You've got your family there. Having a bad day, call a friend. I don't know, hang out with someone. Whereas in London, it's like everyone's kind of just doing their own thing. So I think the expectation and reality of living in London are two very different things when you're at such an impressionable and young age and you've never lived abroad. I guess my advice for anyone going into that is to just have someone you can call all the time.
Right, so let's go into your degree a bit more specifically. You studied ecology, biodiversity, and climate change.
Correct. Yeah, I specified in that, yeah.
So you specified in that. How did it shape your outlook of the world?
Ooh.
So let's say after you studied it, did you feel a sense of urgency that we really need to change something?
Yeah, I did. Especially considering how many resources we had within like our final year when I was specializing in all of that. You're met with a lot of real life scenarios and a lot of real life data, and you work with that data and you're seeing it in front of you and you're wrangling and you're working with it and you're making conclusions from it that are quite terrifying actually, and that a lot of people don't see or feel, understandably, because it's like, why would you see a set of data and feel scared by it? But I think it really shaped my perspective on the world and made me a little bit of a defeatist. I think that also played a role in me steering away from science for a little while, because I became very pessimistic and very defeatist in my view on the world. Because I was like, well, we're all gonna die by climate change. What's the point, But when I look around at, my peers who have stayed within science and continue to work within research and within academia, it kind of fills me with hope, because I'm like, there's people that actually believe that change can happen and change will happen, just not overnight. And because of the impatient person I am, I did not think that was possible at the time. And working in the creative industry the last few years, it's reshaped that again, and I feel a lot more stoic almost to everything, a little bit indifferent as well, because you have to understand, outside of climate change and the big factors that are quite literally making our world go around and shaping our systems and our societies, people are just living their lives and doing their best every day, and that's all you can do. That's what you can do, like, whereas before, previously, I'd kind of be like, well, why aren't people caring more? Why aren't people, making it a priority to recycle, to reuse, and and like read journals, but sometimes it's very much just that it's overwhelming, and it does cause a defeatist outlook when people aren't listening to you or when you aren't seeing change overnight. And I had to come to terms with understanding that time is a huge factor in everything you do and in your outlook in life, and it's understanding time. It's understanding that you aren't going to get what needs to be done tomorrow or next week or next year or in 2 years. It might be 10 years. You might not even live to see that change, in fact. So coming to terms with that, I think I was able to sort of offset the pessimistic view that I gained from specializing in ecology and conservation and climate change. And there's also a lot of hope in like small pockets, and I think we focus so much on the negative aspect and like the scary fear-mongering aspects of things that you forget to really appreciate like the positives. For example, like Bengal tigers going up in the last few years, those numbers, like no one talks about that. That's a huge win. That's so difficult, but yeah, that's just like an example of a win that I think I hold on to on a daily and I read about, and I'm like, oh, like that makes me want to go back in, because when you see things like that, when you see statistics like that come out, it's so reassuring. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about living, right?
Okay.
So one of the major aspects, or major cultural aspects to be precise, of a Malaysian student's life when you're in the UK is obviously the Malaysian night.
Yeah.
And you were the director for ICL's Malaysian night in 2020, if I'm not mistaken here. Can you briefly give a summary of what a Malaysian night is?
I would define it as sort of the cultural flagship event for all Malaysians living abroad, in uni. So you have it for almost like every institution, British institution that has a Malaysian society. I was very lucky to be able to direct it for my second year. And in my first year, I actually was a part of it as well, a small part. I was within the sort of acting department. But yeah, I think that was like one of the avenues that really allowed me to hone my creative skills and my creative passions. And it was the first time I had ever written a script for a full-fledged 3-hour show. Like, who can even say they've done that? You know, I think that's so sick. You know, it was obviously at a scale much smaller than some may like, me included, but it's a start, it's something. And yeah, I had great fun doing it.
How does one become director of Malaysian Night?
I think just building connections with your seniors and stuff that you meet. Don't be shy. I think I was very shy to begin with, but being in the acting department, you're kind of forced to come out of your shell, obviously. Like, you have to be on stage and act like, ew, that's, you know, kind of scary to some people. But I relied a lot on my seniors. I built really close relationships with them. I also built relationships with like the cast and people of our age. And I think from there we sort of bonded and like formed this community that ended up being the leading community for the following MNight, because we already kind of had that relationship and that synchrony within the arts, you know, like one person was the music director and then one person was the producer and then I ended up being the director and someone was also helping out with script writing, and we were all friends before that. So I think it's just like forming that community and like just not enclosing yourself to fear, you know, like just allowing it to happen, and putting yourself out there. Yeah.
Malaysian Night is usually held, at least for Imperial, I think somewhere in March, right?
Yeah, around March, yeah.
And obviously in 2020 was when things were going south in terms of COVID, right?
Yeah.
Was there like a decision you had to make about whether we're going to continue?
Yeah.
Tell us a story, you know?
We had just started hearing of the cases.
Yeah.
But it was nothing solidified. It was one of those things where I was like, oh, someone's tweeting about it, whatever, you know, like literally 2-3 weeks after the show had finished, we all packed up, went home.
Exactly.
Some people ended up staying there in London. Early on, we were like, because obviously for MNight, it's a full-fledged 3-hour show. For us specifically, we had about 300 packs seated in one hall. And you can imagine at the time of when all these viruses were breaking out, that's a nightmare. That is a public health nightmare. And we were just students. There was no real adults around us like helping us with any of this, you know, because the union was also ran by older students.
Correct.
So no one really knew what was going on. But it's really interesting because obviously at Imperial, we have quite a big public health sector. And we have a lot of researchers and academics that understand the level of the viruses that were escalating at the time, but they weren't well informed enough to be able to make announcements just like that, right? So for us, we had to have a backup plan. So our backup plan was essentially to make it all virtual already.
Ooh.
So it was to literally just live stream it. And for everyone who's already bought their tickets, they would just get access to that and no one else would. But thankfully that didn't happen. We still managed to pull off 300 people for 2 nights. So, and it was great because it was like the last final bit of like, you know, community interaction that we had for a
like
while.
a solid 18 months, right?
Yeah, literally. So yeah, we got very lucky with the timing. Very lucky. Very, very, very lucky. So
Okay, let's talk about early career.
yeah.
So upon graduating from university, what was the job hunt like in London?
Very difficult. It is brutal out there. Because I was sort of making the change of switching fields from science and into a creative field, not many people trusted me with that because the only sort of experience I had was with MNight.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, in a lot of eyes, in a professional's experience and eyes, it's not real, you know? So it was very difficult for me, but I think overall, generally, there's a level of luck that is there for people who do get jobs immediately out of uni, especially as an international student. When you're on a visa for, you know, the graduate visa specifically for those 2 years, it's a very short amount of time in terms of like corporate or, you know, within the business mindset. So a lot of people don't feel like they should invest in you because of that, which is a shame. because I feel like a lot of talent gets lost or, gets shipped back to Malaysia. Not necessarily lost. I think it just gets redirected, right? But obviously the resources in the UK and in London, they are almost endless in comparison to here, where it's a lot more restricted. So it's like when you are there and you get your foot in the door, you want to stick it there, and you want to be able to sort of flourish and like grow your skills as much as you can. So it actually took me a while to find my first job. So I was working as a part-time waitress, which I don't think actually, that was probably one of the best moments of my life. Like, it really shaped who I am today. And I would highly recommend for anybody to work a service job at least once in their life. It changes you as a person and your outlook on like just being a human. And it honestly teaches you so much about how to treat people and how to treat yourself, in fact. And I think people skills are something that aren't taught within a lot of academic institutions, within internships. Obviously you do gain that within the workspace, but yeah, I think you gain a different level of it by working any sort of service job. Eventually I did land my first job, thankfully. So I really just stuck with it, but yeah, unfortunately then my visa just ran out to move home, which sucks, but yeah.
What were the factors that came about when you were applying for a job?
I think I was a lot pickier at the start of it. So I would look at pay. Because obviously London living and wanting to be financially independent, you have to consider that. Cost of living is absolute insanity. At the time as well, the inflation was really going up, like post-uni. That was a huge factor for me. But then slowly over time, realizing how difficult it was to be able to actually land a job, let alone an interview, you definitely started lowballing yourself a lot more to be able to get anything. The salary was a huge, huge deciding factor to begin with, but then slowly over time, it became more so like, okay, what can the company give me and teach me over time? Because at this point, I can't really be picky with salary, considering I'm coming from a place of not much experience within the creative field. So I had to think for myself, what can I gain from this? Because at the end of the day, the company can only gain so much from me, considering that factor, And at the end of it, it became for me what brands I would be working with, right? Like, I would want to work with really internationally recognized brands to be able to put onto my CV and to be able to really just help me grow my skills, my client communication skills, my project management skills, etc., etc., and my creative ideation as well. I think the bigger the brand, the harder it is to come up with something that is very engaging creatively, because the stakes are so high.
You've since moved back to KL, obviously. What was the major factor that led to that? Was it purely the visa, or?
It was also a lot of personal changes for my life while I was there, around the time that my visa was expiring. I'm just going to come out and say my relationship ended, my long-term relationship ended, which was a huge thing. It was a huge factor in that. And I think the timing of it, alongside with my visa expiring soon, and also knowing that the company I was at was a startup. It was a creative startup, and there was no way they were going to sponsor my visa, and they made that very known. So I had to pretty much pack up all my things, because for me to try and find, a company that was willing to sponsor my visa with, just the 1 year of experience that I had was very unlikely. But it worked out for me. I feel like everything's just been in abundance since moving home. So as scary as it is to make that change and to leave behind everything you've built and everything you've known for the last 6 years, trust your gut, trust your intuition, trust the timing of things, trust that everything will work out, and just really have a positive mindset. Literally fake it till you make it, and you will.
You mentioned that obviously the company you're working with in London is a startup, and you came back to Malaysia. You worked with quite an established PR firm in Malaysia. What are the differences in the two?
Actually, not much. Like, I would say they were pretty on par, considering the startup that I was at was slowly venturing into the established side of things. I will say, however, that the startup lacked a little bit of company structure when it came to things like HR and employee rights protection. So that was a bit of a shame, but I think that's kind of a given, considering as a startup, that's not your main priority. As a startup, your main priority is revenue and growing and profit, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, I know that now. Back then I didn't. So yeah.
Let's talk about working in PR, right? What are the things that are to you great, and what are the things which are really difficult?
Okay, let's start with the really difficult. I think dealing with entitlement, because PR is a very people-facing role, right? You have to learn and know how to manage people's expectations very well, and you have to almost manipulate it sometimes in a way. Sounds really bad, but I feel like my PR agency is gonna watch this and be like, don't say that, don't say that. But it is true, like there is a level of that. And I think the easiest for me, I was really, really, really good at client comms. I think like building that relationship with my clients. I think when I left, I had gotten messages, personal messages from my clients asking to sort of meet up. And I thought that was just so heartwarming. I was like, really? So we're friends? Like, that's so nice. So I think I was quite good at that. That came quite naturally. Also the writing aspect. So we would have to write and disseminate press releases, right? For a lot of launches, for a lot of different brands. And because I had a very naturally innate sort of instinct for beauty and poetry as well, like I just have an interest in poetry too, I was sort of able to write these releases quite easily and with very minimal feedback most of the time. So yeah, I would say that that was one of my strongest suits and one of the things that I enjoyed the most. You've got to make it an engaging story, and you've got to make it also informative. So it's like finding the balance between the two. So yeah.
What does a normal week in working in PR look like?
A lot of lifting boxes, a lot of packing. There's a lot
Wait,
of
you mean
manual labor.
literally?
Yeah, there's a lot of manual labor that people don't see or know about.
Okay.
Especially, okay, so for example, when it comes to seedings, right? So when you have a PR campaign happening, you've got to give out what we call seedings to influencers and to media. And a lot of PR kits that we receive are not packed already. So we are packing that. We're packing literally hundreds a week. And then we are also labeling them with addresses, quite literally manually. But I kind of liked it because I think working behind a desk 24/7 can get very tedious and strenuous. So being able to do physical work like that is almost like a relief. I think there's also just a lot of client meetings because working in an agency particularly, you're going to be carrying and handling a lot of accounts for different campaigns. And you've always got to touch base on a regular basis with your clients to be like, hey, are we still aligned for XYZ? This is the progress on XYZ. And some progress updates require a lot of meetings and just talking for an hour about one thing that could have probably been resolved if we were in the same office, but that's not how a lot of businesses work. But yeah, agency life moves very fast. Working in PR is also a lot of events, which is the fun part, you know, getting to socialize, getting to see everything come to fruition, you know, see the key product launches in front of you, being able to know about the brand, talk about it. And it's almost like selling it a little bit, but that's not your goal, right? Like you're just passionate about it. So you're kind of doing it naturally. Yeah.
After you've had your first job or two, right, and a few years after that, you're somewhere in a crossroads. Like you take a step back and you decide, what do I really want to do next?
Yeah.
Most people, I believe, especially the younger ones, are at that point in life. So what do you want to do next?
In the long run, definitely doing my master's. That's been in the cards since before I even graduated from my bachelor's. I knew I wanted to do it, I just wasn't certain in what. And I think it was after my first job, like you said, when I really solidified that for myself. Because I think after working for the first time, full time, I quickly realized that for my ambitions and goal, I think as a person in this life of wanting to achieve really big, great things, I can't do that solely based off of just working. I think there needs to be some theory in that to back what I want to do, which is eventually to combine my interests in sort of the creative aspect with science, as I mentioned. Yeah, I think I would definitely need the theory side of things to build that foundation for myself and to be able to create that avenue for myself, because it's a very niche combination, right? There's very few places in the world that allow you to do that firstly, and that there's very few businesses that provide opportunities for you to do that as well. So it could potentially be something that I would have to start myself, and I can't do that without certain qualifications, and I've come to terms with that and realized it. But I also know that there is no rush in going into that. I think rushing things for the sake of wanting it immediately, especially as someone as impatient as me generally might do more harm than any good. And you see that sometimes left, right, and center with people who start certain businesses or venture into certain fields and try to do big things with it, but because it's, there's not a solid foundation and not a solid intention there, it gets lost in the sauce almost. Like I said, I like to say that a lot, getting lost in the sauce. So, but yeah, for me, it's just about eventually doing my master's in a field very niche, but will combine my two interests and allow me to achieve the goals that I want to in the long run. Yeah.
Do you have any regrets?
Yeah, definitely. My only regret would be not utilizing all my resources while I was at Imperial. Because, like I said, that opportunity to be in an institution like that opportunity comes so rarely. And I wish I had done more. I wish I had worked myself to the bone, actually, in fact. But at the end of the day, it all worked out for me. But I do wish I had utilized all the resources that we had there that aren't available anywhere else. I feel like it would have definitely honed my creative passions a lot more as well, but is what it is. Yeah, so yeah, I would say that's my only regret.
Can you describe your journey lepas sekolah in 3 words?
Oh, 3 words. I would say non-linear, slightly chaotic. That's 2 words, but chaotic, and quite sentimental. I feel like I put a lot of meaning and thought and intention behind everything I do, so sentimental is a big one for me, I would say. I'm Nafisa, and this is my journey Lepas Sekolah.